Wow, it's been a long time since I produced one of these. And I suppose that is because until just recently, I was playing a lot of the same games over and over and over again. You know, a lot of my all-time favorite games. And I've only recently started branching out and playing games that I've played for the first time a lot more recently. And this is the first time I've ever actually played the original Kirby Superstar. I grew up with the remake of Superstar Ultra, which I do prefer to this, but when I initially played it, I kind of felt like it was kind of underwhelming, you know? I felt like the concepts weren't all that fleshed out, that it was just kind of underwhelming, that it just didn't really deliver the same way that other Super Nintendo classics did, you know? And to a certain extent, I still kind of feel that way, but on the other hand, now that I've developed into a full-fledged Kirby fan, someone who has played through all of the games and knows quite a bit more about the history and the characters, like, I find myself appreciating it a lot more. Like, this is a very fun, unique little platformer game in which you, Kirby, go on a variety of different adventures that are incredibly streamlined. It's kind of remarkable to look at this game and to look at its general structure, but there are 8 different modes in this game. 8 games in one, in which you go through a variety of different adventures with Kirby. You know, fighting different bosses, going through different scenarios with completely different mechanics. It is wild to see just how much content this cartridge packs. To put it very simply, it's almost like they utilized less resources to put in like NES style games into this Super Nintendo cart and created this kind of a throwback experience that feels a lot like early NES stuff, in which the games are relatively simple, they're straightforward, they aren't all that long, and yet every time you come back to them, you'll have a lot of fun with what they offer. In fact, during my return to this game, you know, playing through quite a lot of, you know, Superstar, you know, I ended up playing like Milky Way Wishes, Spring Breeze, and the Arena, and it really struck me just how wildly different these games actually are, and just how much effort and time put into making each of them wildly different. In a lot of ways, I feel like this is the Kirby game that kind of defined what Kirby would eventually become. Because, of course, Kirby's Adventure invented the iconic copy ability, which everyone knows, but I feel like Superstar is what really made the franchise work. You know, it really utilized the design philosophy of making relatively easy to get into games with a lot of secrets to uncover and a lot of things to find. It is shocking, you know, how much effort I've had to put into to beating the final gauntlet in this game, the arena. You know, going through all these bosses, which are all very straightforward in the main game, but all of them are so well designed and difficult that when you go through the arena and fight them all in sequence, you really start appreciating the nuance and the strategies that you can take to optimize your run. And like, that is, I think, a really good example of how well Kirby is made. You know, I think it's very common for people to assume that like difficult games are better by default, but Kirby, I think, kind of emphasizes how important having a well-designed experience is, even for less skilled players. Like, this game is so well balanced and so well utilized that bosses you breeze through in the main game suddenly become like just real problems when you're trying to optimize your run through the arena. Like, it's very, very interesting to see just how engaging something like this can be in a game like this. And I think that really is what makes Kirby Superstar very special, is that it is something that you come back to. Like, this is a game that I was initially kind of underwhelmed by, that I didn't see the appeal of, that I thought was kind of overrated, that I thought didn't really live up to, like, my expectations for it. But as I come back to it over and over and over again, like, I've begun to really appreciate everything it does. It's very interesting to come back to this game after such a long way away from it and realizing just how much I really enjoy it and just how much my opinion on it has changed over the years. Because this isn't the first time I've gone through all of it recently. I went back and I did the True Arena in the DS version of Kirby Superstar Ultra. A couple years back when I believe when I was going back through all these old Kirby games that I owned and doing all the arenas, like I came away from that experience just really, really surprised with just how much I really, really love this game and its design. And it's interesting to me to see how much my opinion on this has changed over time, because my initial impressions on it are still valid. You can still argue that the game does reuse a lot of elements and that like not all the game modes are good and that they're not all that interesting and that there are certain aspects that don't work. But as a whole, this is probably one of the better Kirby games to get into if you're starting to get into the wider franchise for the first time. Like, obviously, you want to start with, like, whatever Kirby game is brand new to get into it. But if you're getting into, like, older Kirby games, this is probably the definitive one to start with, because it's such a great balance between, like, where the series started and where it would eventually end up. And I think that's led itself to have a bit of a reputation for being one of the definitive Kirby games, something that, like, anybody can pick up and play and have a great time with. Traditionally, I feel like my criticisms of this game essentially amounted to the fact that there were so many Super Nintendo games I loved so much more. But, the more time I spend with this game, the more time I spend playing Kirby, the more I realize that, like, I really appreciate and love what this game did in spite of that. Just because better games exist, that doesn't demean or diminish the value that something like this exhibits. Like, I am very, very happy that I got the chance to play this game and that I got to experience it. It is a fantastic Nintendo classic.